Hello, everyone. We're back again on the Embodiment podcast and this particular branch around trauma. And with me today is a person whose name I can be sure that I pronounce correctly. Actually, that I might actually not, but Melissa Gutierrez, who is connecting from New York. And she is an embodiment teacher, and I will let her introduce herself in a while and tell us about her work. But we will be discussing today one of our favorite topics in the embodiment world, which is using and integrating the body, and how important it is that we actually do that in the work that we do. And I really absolutely thrilled to see time and again when people go like, oh, that's why we need to integrate the body. Oh, that's why I've been working on this and that, but I haven't gotten to the place where I think I should be. Mm-hmm. And this is people, lots of people who come into the embodiment world find that, oh, this is the missing link. This is the thing that I was needing, or even what, I mean, I know when I got that moment, and I still remember that clearly, like, it's a very clear sensation of this is the piece that I was that was missing in my okay, I can't say journey if I want to sound poetic.
We're always in a journey, in a process, of course.
So Mel, do you want to share, did you have this inside yourself? Have you always known that the body is important? How did you come across embodiment and its importance?
You know, I think that's a fabulous question. And I can tell you when that moment hit me, if I were to distill it down to one moment, I think there's many moments. And I think for everybody listening, there will be more moments. It's not like once you get it, you've arrived and everything's wonderful and falls into place. It's like, oh, there's reminders, go back to the body, use your body, be in the body. And I will say though that my seminal moment with embodied work was very raw and very, I didn't have language for it. So I was in college and I was diagnosed with pretty severe clinical depression. And I was in a very competitive all-women's college. Shout out to Smith College in Massachusetts. That's a pride and joy for me. It's my tribe, Smithies all the way. But it was intense as an experience, and as it is for many people. And when I got diagnosed, it was very classic diagnosis. It was like periods of deep depression and inertia, 2 weeks at a time, affecting performance, affecting my ability to eat, affecting my health, all the stuff. And they offered me medication. I was in therapy, and I don't have a judgment against medication. At the time I did, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. Now I don't think I would have so much of the same heavy judgment, or any. But I recognized that when I started to feel the depression coming on, because it's in waves, when it's clinically defined, it comes to you in waves. It can last for 2 to 6 weeks, and then you can kind of come out of it. Maybe you get a little manic, there's this energy flux. I recognized that when the wave was coming, if I forced myself to move, I could cut some of the depression down. So it was like, again, I want to say very raw form. I'm not giving anyone advice right now on how to handle their depression. But I remember feeling the terror of the depression coming, because it was going to suck me into a dark hole. I knew what was coming, and I was sad, and I had no hope, of the despair, heaviness in my body. And I remember I said to myself, if you get up, if you go for a run, you will combat this energy that's coming to you. You don't have to live in it. Go do something else. And I don't know, I can't tell you where that came from, that knowledge, that voice, an accumulation of all the things I've ever experienced, whatever, who cares? It was there. And I got into the habit of, whenever I felt anxiety or depression, to A, recognize it. That's the first step. And then B, go do something about it. And I would run, I would exercise. And unfortunately, when you're learning something, that process, though very effective, the pendulum kind of swung harshly the other way. And I developed a bit of exercise bulimia for the time. You know, because you get kind of addicted to the way the chemicals in your body feel, and you're like, oh my God, I never have to feel sad again. If I just never stop moving and exercise all the time, life will be great. And that's also not true. So you find a balance, but I do remember that very keenly. And then I remember being like, why isn't everybody else doing this? I'm sad too, go do something about it. Go be different, go be a different person for a second. And you'll remember that there's options. And it felt, I think what made it different for me is it just felt very simple. It didn't matter if I didn't want to do anything. I just did it because I knew it would change. So I just wasn't in my feelings, like as the kids say. I wasn't in my feelings. I was in my body.
That's the kids these days. Right.
As the kids say, I wasn't in my feelings, I was in my body.
I love that you mentioned this thing about feels right up after you mentioned balance, right? Because I see a tendency, and again, I am very in favor of when you haven't done one thing, like if you haven't had anything to drink, you will want to drink the entire cup. Normal, right? Yeah. And yeah. Sort of like I might be a little, I mean, some will call me lenient on that side, but I mean, I don't care. I'm very trusting of this work that I do into allowing the movement to go to the other side of the pendulum. Mm-hmm. Of course, we don't want to stay there forever, but as I love that this beauty in your story, how you feel that you're able to breathe once you touch on the other side. And you know, it's not great. And as you refer to, it's like a disorder around, you know, exercise, and it's not cool, and we don't want to stay there. And you actually did not stay there, I know, right? But just the fact that you can able to stand in a place where I can move, I can do something about it. I mean, that might not be available to all, but we're acknowledging the fact that some people may be able to step into the access of actual power and will, which is not easy to achieve in many situations, right? So giving credit for the benefit that we can acquire from even when that's on the other extreme, right? That's
yeah, this makes me emotional in a way that isn't like teary sad. I mean emotional, like lit up, where this is kind of running, I think, into the middle of the theme of our conversation. But I think what I want people to know as an embodiment teacher and all the work that you and I do, and that many people do now, is that you have a choice. It doesn't always have to feel, whatever it is you're going through, it doesn't always have to be this way. And if you access the physical self in a way to help you with that, you don't even have to believe it to make it work. You just do it. And eventually things will start to shift. And that's what makes me so passionate about bringing this work to others. Because I'm like, it just never has to be this bad all the time. It just never does.
One thing that I love about your story, Mel, sorry that I'm staying here just a bit, but
sure.
It's super enriching. And there's so many things that we can discuss that might be of benefit to some people that might be listening. One thing that I love about your story is sometimes when we're in these states of despair or hopelessness or difficulty, mm-hmm. we sometimes have a narrow vision, right? I cannot do this. I cannot get this. I'm failing at this. Mm-hmm. You're like any other human. You cycle around these thoughts a lot, yep. Right? And when we're spiraling around the same thought, I'm a failure, I'm awful, I'm incapable, it's really fucking hard. You know, it makes it even harder, right? Yeah. And even it, you know, I've heard this story that I will say something astrological, because I know not everybody is, but I love to introduce these kinds of words. But I once heard about those people who have the moon in Taurus, which I do. And we get stressed because we see that we're stressed, right? So mm-hmm. It's not just the stress in itself and the thought that's awful, but then, oh, I cannot spiral out. I cannot come out of this train of thought that's super disempowering and sort of like downgrading. I'm worried that I cannot get out of it. And that's digging even deeper, right? But one of the things that I see in your story is how we see that, oh, I do not have this way out. I don't have access to my, let's say, my will, which in many cases is the issue, particularly when there's trauma involved.
Yeah.
But in your story, I see other resources happening as well, and resources that we might not even consider that we might not even consider we have them. And you refer to that voice. I don't know where that came from, that instruction that told you to go out and run, go out
Right.
and sometimes we have these as actual voices from people around us that care, but sometimes we don't all have access to actual people with voices, or actually voices with bodies.
Yeah.
That are cheering for us, or that are supporting us, or that can guide us, because they see us beyond that issue that we're having. And that's as a resource that I am always mourning that we don't have as a society. Yeah. But definitely I love that sometimes these resources that are not visible appear, and how important is that. I'm jumping maybe a little too fast into this like more intangible world, but I love to address this because one of my missions in this trauma area around the podcast is on mystifying the mystic, and actually saying these are actual stuff that are resources at the end of the day. And the issue is not that it's a mystic thing or an invisible thing. It's how we have been relating to those things in the past. That's what creates difficulty in us accepting the reality that these are actual resources for us, and going to very objective observation as your story. That's what actually got me through. That's what sort of like that push that you needed, right?
You know, I do want to address this right now, because people might hear this podcast and they'll look me up and they'll be like, oh, Mel the Body Witch. And then they may go to my Instagram or my website and be like, yo, this bitch is crazy, right? Like, or something like that. So I want to make this very clearly operational right now, because that is also the focus of our work as embodied teachers. And even in my work, it's fine to dress it up in whatever theater or drama appeals to you most as an individual. And the theater and drama that appeals to me most is in the lineage of spirituality that I grew up with, and now as a modern day practicing, which, along as being a very highly educated, science-minded biomechanist and personal trainer who has trained professional athletes and who has trained people post-operative work, trauma, rehab, and terminal illness into transition. You know, so there's a groundedness to all of the experience we're talking about. So let me clarify that and put it in the real world for people who are like, I'm struggling. I don't have a fucking voice, Melissa, in my head telling me how to get up and find my shit. No problem. I'm going to help you right now. What I can tell you clearly is that when I felt the most despair, and this has been something that I've hooked into for my entire life now, when I feel intense emotion, even happy intense emotion, and I recognize that there is, we can call it momentum, intensity, strength, and when those emotions rise up and start to tell me a story, I hit a pause button and I start to pay less attention. I start to attribute less meaning to my feelings, because if I followed the feelings that sometimes still plague me, you don't work hard enough, you're a fucking loser, look at how you're lazy. Nobody who knows me would ever say that about me, but those are, you know, we all have metaphorical demons that we have in our head. When that shit comes up to you, you have a choice. Those voices are clear. Nobody has a problem hearing the bad voices. We take for granted that we can believe that and make that shit real, because we also live in a society that rewards you for feeling bad. Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to get people to see is that your feelings deserve to be honored and acknowledged, but they do not necessarily tell you about your reality. You get to define your reality. So if you're hearing a whole bunch of shitty voices, why don't you just do something that's the opposite? I'm depressed. I don't want to get up. I don't want to move. I'm too fucking sad. Who cares? Who cares if you're sad? Is sad taking your legs away? I went through a devastating breakup 2 weeks before the pandemic hit New York City. And the first thing I did the next day, go to the gym. Did I feel like it? Was I sad? Yeah. But nothing is more important than me being in my body, taking care of my body. And I had a voice in my head that said, bitch, because I sometimes get ghetto with myself because I have to talk to myself in the language I understand. And I was like, bitch, you broke your heart, not your legs. Get the fuck up and go. And I was like, okay, there's a very big difference between how we handle our emotions and how we handle the rest of our lives. People spend way too much time in their feelings and saying, it's all real and it must be true. It's not. It's that simple.
I love how you address the fact that we tend to believe the downgrading thoughts more than the uplifting or the...
Always. You're anxious? Me too. Are you sad and depressed? Me too. Did you hear that tree tell you how beautiful you are? No, you're fucking crazy. I can't have a happy thought. I can't be okay. Did you know I woke up today and I felt, God, I really love myself. Well, that's weird. That's what people are going to say to you. I had the best time with a dog. I felt like, like I pet it and I was like, people are always so suspicious of what feels good.
Yeah.
And
this is such an important issue that I love to address. I work a lot with the transgenerational stuff.
Right.
And yes, on one side, we could go as technical as to address that there is intergenerational trauma around feeling happy, around success.
Of course.
Because lots of family lines have lived stories of, let's say, famine or, poverty. They had to migrate. And these are very, very dreadful stories.
Yes.
And people lived very anguishing and awful lives. And we see how sometimes it is difficult for descendants of these family lines to be happy, to acknowledge have enough, to actually not just enjoy the money, but actually making money when there's been generations that have suffered from this, right? So I think it's highly important to take into consideration how there's this intergenerational trauma affecting the fact that it's more difficult for us to access these, let's call them pleasant, because I do not like to go into the negative, positive thing.
Yes.
Pleasant. And also just the fact that even if you don't want to look at the intergenerational and you might think that's too much, or you have no idea where your ancestors came from, because this is also something that happens plenty in the US where you live. Many people do not know stories about, their ancestry. So it might be difficult to connect in that side, but there's also all of this science around the brain and its biology of how we are under the effects of trauma. We tend to see things. I think there are two things that are affecting this thing that we're mentioning. So both that there is black and white thinking. Is this person good? Is this person bad? Is this person doing something that I don't like? Forever out of the picture. Never again will you be able to, be part of my circle. Right. That's one of the issues around trauma. And another thing that affects the neurobiology of the body, of course, the brain, is that it tends to have a narrower perspective. And that narrow perspective tends to be looking for cues of danger, cues of what might be unsafe. And that's usually focusing, on the negative, and on the bad things. That enlarges that negativity. And there are even some researchers. I sometimes like to put all of this information on the table and then let people process it on their own and decide. But there are some people that say that even when there has been no transgenerational trauma, even when there has been no trauma in your life, in your own personal story, the brain also tends to do this negativity, called a negativity bias. So whatever it is, the story that you decide to believe in, or to want to believe, or whatever, I mean, it's important to acknowledge how this is an operational thing happening in your body, right?
It is, and I do want to acknowledge that, because I'm speaking in a really simplistic way, right? Like, I'm being really strong with my language, like, it doesn't fucking matter how you feel, get your shit together, that kind of thing. And that's because the process can be simple. I never said it was easy. I never said the work that it takes is easy. I just said this is how you can start to move, and just a way to move and shift out of what we consider to be a negative bias, you know. But I do also, and it's a short podcast, so like there's only so much when you're desperate to give people tools, when you're like, hey, so it has to come out kind of truncated. But I do want to acknowledge the very real impact that transgenerational trauma has genetically. It shows up in our bodies, we know that definitively. Acute trauma, maybe you don't come from that. Acute trauma in this moment for you. That's going to affect your body in the now. Maybe you've never had hardship, so you suffer from not knowing how to develop resilience because you've never had hardship.
Yes.
This is what I mean by, at some point, it doesn't matter. It's helpful to have insight, I think, and if that's great and that helps you, good. I do think that's helpful. And as Patty does her family constellation work, you know, working with our ancestors, and the stories are very important. And I do think that's healing. I would never suggest you skip it. But I think the problem that I see when I finally get a client at my door is that they've been in therapy and talking for a while. And I'm like, but what are we doing about it? Like, there's all this navel gazing. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. But what are you doing about it? You know, like, the story doesn't matter. The only story that matters is the one you tell yourself. And I saw the most, to highlight it in a way that has nothing to do with my experience or anybody I know, I saw this amazing YouTube channel called Soft White Underbelly. And he's a photographer and a videographer who interviews people with really difficult lives. And I consider it a bit of a compassion practice. Like, you know, I watch, and it's perspective and all that. And there was a young woman on there who suffered horrendous sexual abuse in her formative life, and, you know, her formative years as a child into her teens. And it affected her in the way that typically we will see. And it sprouted that trauma into other areas of her life and behaviors that she was unhappy with in herself, and getting into abusive relationships. And of course, right, all the stuff that we hear about. But she ended her interview, and when the interviewer asked her, how are you doing now? She said, you know what it is? One day I said to myself, okay, you were terribly abused and your parents failed you. Fine. Okay, the foster system, it failed you. Okay, the school system, it failed you. So fucking what? You're 22. You have an entire life you can live. What do you want to do with it? Who do you want to be? And I was like, damn, if that woman, and she said, I don't know where that voice came from. God bless her, though, that it even happened. How many people go through less and are unwilling to detach from the story of what it is and go, fuck it, I'm starting over. None of that shit matters. I'm going to rebuild my body. I'm going to rebuild my mind. I'm going to rebuild how I see the world. That's simple. It's not easy. And I want to acknowledge that. It's not, folks, but it's available to you anytime.
That's such an interesting topic. As you were mentioning, Mel, when you say translating therapy into action, I think this is one of the issues that lots of people start to recognize when they come in contact with embodiment, which is actually bringing it to like the material world. What would you like to share about how we are starting to see I'm going to say a trend, although I hate and the fact, in a sense, that this issue around working with the body is sort of like more common knowledge, and more people are looking for these types of solutions?
I hear you asking that, like, is it a fad now? Why is it a fad? Why is it becoming like a thing? Is that
Or how have you seen it in your work? Because I know that you've always been close to working with the body, but how has it changed throughout these recent years?
I would say, particularly around the pandemic, especially, that people start to realize the value of their physical experience, not just because the pandemic is making us, especially in the beginning of it, confront our mortality in a really ugly, scary way on a daily basis. And I feel the need to pause just for a moment before I go on and talk about how my embodiment work has changed over the years, and particularly right now in the trend of embodied coaching. It's very easy to fall into this language of like, oh, well, in the pandemic and look at how we're suffering. I want to acknowledge that there are people in developing nations and underdeveloped nations that have been suffering this kind of dramatic difficulty all the time. And it becomes a trend when people in the first world get a handle on it and get to monetize it and talk about it. And I'm not saying I'm not grateful to be in the first world. Trust me, I am. My ancestors and I are happy that I have landed on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. I've worked very hard for that. But, you know, there is part of the embodied coaching trend is talking about being in your body like it's this newly discovered thing. I want to say it's something that we're reincorporating in a first world industrialized nation using this language, because it's something that we used to do very naturally. And certain modern day practices kind of cut us off from the power of our bodies. And I won't go into the history of it, right? Because there's just too much there about how we got to that point. And it's too deep. It's a college class. It's an entire course. So it's not for here, but I just wanted to acknowledge that, because how it's showing up for me here with my clients may not be the same as how it's showing up for somebody else in another country. And I can say though that the pandemic cut people's lives down quite a bit. And suddenly people were like, I can't go to work. I can't do this. I'm really scared. Let me go for a walk every day. Let me just go for my we would call it the sad pandemic walk. But people did it and it became ritualistic. And if they didn't go for a walk in that day, they would go insane. And I was observing and I was like, people are starting to see, like, when tragedy strikes, if you can move a little bit, you can move the chemicals of the fear and the adrenaline on the very basic level, at least flush them out of your system. Because when people are like, I feel weird if I don't go for a walk, I'm like, oh, wait, that's a door that we're starting to open. You're acknowledging that if you move, you don't know why, but you feel better. And who cares the how and why? You don't need to know all the neuroscience and all that shit. I'll take care of that. But like, then you can see, oh, hey, did you know that that walk makes you feel better? But you know, if you stretch a little bit and do a little yoga, you might also move some other experiences through you that feel better. You know, if you pick up a weight, you can direct your energy a certain way. You might feel really triumphant at the end of doing a challenging workout. You know, if you sweat a little bit, hey, are you sad? Did you dance for joy today? It's okay if you don't feel it. Just dance anyway, like you're on stage and you have to transmit joy to your audience. And so there's this language that's formed for us more and more where it's not just personal training, it's coaching. It's not just people, we know dancers who teach dance. It's never just been about dance, it's about expression. Now people, I think, are just accepting the reality of it and are willing to play in that space a little bit more. That's why we're seeing this like embodied coaching.
Sort of like we're locked up and restricted in movement, then we recognize the importance of movement. Is that what I understand that you've seen?
Oh yeah, because people are like, oh, if I don't have like as a personal trainer, right? I'm in a position pre-pandemic where it was very, it was a status thing to have a personal trainer. So, you know, unless you were severely injured, and then it's like, I need help. But you know, it's sort of like a chore. I have to do this. I have to work my body. The language was externalized. Like I have to work my body. Oh, my body's falling apart. And now it's like, oh, if I move, I can feel better. You know, it's sort of like also the return to nature. Once people were told you have to stay in the house for a little bit, not even forever, for a little bit, suddenly nature became the most important thing. Orders for houseplants became, you know, went through the fucking roof along with toilet paper. I saw in Central Park, it's New York City, so I'm blessed to see such diversity. I saw Jewish temple gatherings outside. I saw Christian churches outside. I saw santeros doing santeria stuff outside. I was like, how lovely. Everybody remembered how pagan they are. Because when you take it away, it suddenly becomes clear what you're missing. Because your body tells you, I need this for survival. I need this. And you either go with it and you listen to your body and you give it what it needs, or you don't. It's your choice. It's your choice, you know, but you'll either do what you need to make yourself feel better, or you'll ignore it. And you can continue to feel like shit, whatever you want. It's that simple. Not easy.
I'm staying with that phrase that you just said, when it's taken away, then you understand, or when you remove all of what, you know, you're used to, then you find what's important and what you actually need, right? And this, I think in different words for everyone, this has been a very interesting struggle. And I'm saying interested to be nice, you know, people who are like,
non-binary.
This is a beautiful process. You mean it's a fucking hard thing to do. But it's, I mean, I've seen how there's a sort of like a commonality between the struggles that people are facing, even if it's absolutely different, but there is sort of like a common thread around discerning what's actually useful, or what do I actually need out of this, right?
Yeah, I think, and that's hard to discern sometimes for cultural reasons, for background reasons, all the stuff that you talked about earlier. There are many influences, but if you go back to what soothes you on a physical level, very simple, what weighted blankets, that was a trend, and now it's like a normal thing. And I was one of the first people to get one.
We all have at least one.
Right, we all have to have at least the one. And I was, you know, and it was interesting for people to see, like, oh, that makes you feel good. And it's like, yes, and it's okay to do it if it just feels good. It doesn't have to have another reason behind it, you know?
Yeah. You know, this is a topic that I hadn't discussed with a lot of people after or during the pandemic, the value, or finding the value of comforting yourself.
Yeah.
What in the therapy world we sometimes refer to as self-care, but I think it has a different flavor when we talk about integrating comforting and sort of, in a sense, nurturing into our everyday lives, and finding, more importantly, giving it value.
Yes.
I think it's a great way to segue into what we were discussing earlier about finding joy. Even when these are like the worst periods of joy, because lots of very difficult things have been happening for the past years. What do you want to share about this?
So much. I'm trying not to be as quiet and letting my thoughts process, because I realize our audience may be like, did she drop off? No, I'm here. I just, there's so many things that immediately come to mind. I think, you know, to make it the most valuable, to make it applicable for people listening and operational, we talk a lot about finding joy, but there's also creating the experience of joy in your life. And I'm going to choose not to talk about all the background things about the how and whys. I'm just going to suggest that when people hear this, because it sounds very lofty, right? Like if your face is on the ground and you're in the mud and you're in the shit, joy is maybe 10 rungs up a ladder that you're like, I'm on all fours in the dirt. What are you expecting of me? This is what I would love for people to do. Just the way we spoke earlier about the fact that we take for granted our bad feelings. You can make yourself feel bad really easily. You can stub a toe without injuring yourself and feel awful, like that'll hurt. You can watch something sad and be like, oh, I'm really fucking sad. You know, like, I'm so sad, I'm crying. You can do all that. We know that. So why not swing the pendulum a little bit in the other direction and give yourself a moment to go, I'm not going to pay attention to all the horrible shit right now. Let me watch something that makes me laugh. And I'm just going to have a moment to forget. And people are so afraid to do that. They're like, I have to always be in the sad. I'm like, no, you don't. It's okay. Trust me, I do that too. I have to remind myself. That's okay. The sad will still be there. You can go back to it anytime. It'll always be there. And then the truth is, so will joy. So will laughter. You can visit these areas and you can create practices around these areas. So when I say, hey, did you dance for joy? You know, that can bring up a lot of anger in people because they're like, how the fuck am I supposed to dance for joy when, you know, I just lost my husband, or there's horrible things in the world and I can't control this, or I don't have money to pay my bills. I'm like, right. I'm not saying that you have to dance for joy as a way to forget what's happening. It's as a way to give your body a break from the stress it's under, and then to help you recognize what can be done. Because when we get into a space where we only allow ourselves to feel difficult, heavy emotions to process, I'm also trying to be non-binary and judgmental, the less pleasant stuff, you don't fill up your tank. When do you fill up your tank? How are you living? You need a break. And I want people to know, with all the passion I can bring to this, the ability to create a joyful experience is available at any time. It's not easy. It's available. I didn't say it was easy. I'm just saying it's available. And if it's not joy, then you can start with comfort. You know, if joy is 10 rungs up the ladder and you're just starting on the first, just go with comfort. Just go with whatever gives you a little peace. And then we go from there.
You know, one of the things, as I hear you say this, Mel, which I think it's lovely and a wonderful starting point around accessing joy. Particularly, I don't know, I mean, as a New Yorker, does this lie, right? As you said, like, it's available, but then there's a need to keep with like a cultural thing around the emotions, around attitudes, right?
Yeah. It's tough right now because, you know, New York is going through a tough time in that we're seeing a lot of violence towards Asians and Asian American women in particular, and which fills me with rage. And you know, where there was a woman, Michelle Go is her name, who recently passed because a stranger who was clearly unwell. So that's another layer of the story, right? Like somebody who's not getting what they need to be okay in the world, pushed her in front of a subway car and she killed her. And we're scared a lot in New York in a way that we haven't been in a long time. Like that kind of activity in New York was something we saw a lot in the 70s and 80s, and then, you know, it got cleaned up. So when I think about Michelle Go, and other people who are victimized in a way that I take for granted, taking the subway to go to work the way she was, I feel like I do right now. I want to cry, I want to scream, I want to rage. And I'm not telling people, well, when you feel that, ignore it and go dance for joy. I'm saying, because Patty and I talked about emotional bypassing too. I'm saying, feel it. What can you do with it? Recognize that there's only so much you can get out of that. And when you've done that for yourself, now let's carve out a space where for you to soothe and remember that there's other things in life to be joyful for, so that you can create a little bit more of that healthy balance people talk about. Because if I just stay in how sad that story makes me and how rageful, I'm going to leave my house and be more likely to look for ways to engage in conflict, to release some of that anger out of me. And New York is a place we're ready for conflict all the time. I want to be part of a city that's communal and the best of us, like in 9/11, when everybody was like, there was this horrific thing that happened and we reached out to one another. That's an expression of joy, in my opinion. That's like, I have you, it's okay. You don't feel safe, you're a stranger on the street, but here's a bottle of water. You can use my phone so you can contact your family. You know, all those stories. That's the kind of New Yorker I want to be. It's the kind of woman I want to be in the world. I can't do that when all I am feeling is rage and pain and anger. I have to, it's my responsibility to show up well in the world. I also have to be responsible for filling up my joy and vitality tanks so that when I see the opportunity to help somebody, I recognize it and I bring them my best self. And I know we kind of went a little high level in that meta awareness, but that's how I see it. So I don't want people to think I'm telling you, you're not allowed to feel sad or stressed or angry or negative emotions or difficult emotions. I'm saying it's your responsibility to also be well-rounded as a human being and create the other stuff as well. Do not wait for it to come to you. If you wait, you will die waiting.
I think this is a very important balance that you're mentioning, responsibility, right? Particularly, I mean, there's so many ways to address this topic. I've talked about the issue around responsibility around personal work for many years, from very different perspective, cultural, social, going forward into your personal growth. When is it not? When is it a family thing? All of that stuff. But one of the things that I love about what you're saying is how, what I hear is you need to work on resourcing yourself and, you know, like cleaning your car, washing your car before you actually go out and maybe ask for other people also to help you do that. But there's this balance around responsibility. And I think around trauma, it requires this depth of awareness that trauma does cut off a little bit of our ability to do certain stuff, right? So maybe trauma will get me into this like very hyper defensive mode, as you were mentioning. We're ready for conflict, right?
Yep.
So in a sense, we can say, this is my nature, this is what it is, this is the way I am, this is, and we can find when we are at the first stages of coming to awareness of our trauma, we can say, this is who I am, this is my nature, and it helps me, right? And we justify the fact that I need, I don't know, I'm super, let's say, super dependent on my partner because this is the way that I am, and you know, we're romanticizing our trauma. And while I actually might do want to be not a very naive person when I'm living in New York City, which I think is pretty insane to think.
Part of your safety.
Yeah, exactly. Like, keep your eyes open, know how to react. I mean, but that's different from being in hyper defensive mode.
Right. Knowing how to react and respond is different from being reactive as a person all the time. Yeah.
And in the case of romantic relationships, it's very different from, hey, this is the type of attachment that I want to build, versus I have a need to be hyper taken care of or controlling my partner. And that's actually a trauma response. Yeah. And one thing that I find very important when people start to pull, this is one of the dangers of the trend of trauma or all of the trends around therapy, right? Oh, this is what happened. So now the world is responsible to cater to my emotional needs.
Yep. Patty just hissed like a kitty.
I mean, we have an expression in Spanish that I'm having difficult translating in my head, but it's like, it's a no, okay.
Say it in Spanish. We'll translate it together.
Te metes en un saco de 11 varas. So yeah, it's a weird phrase. So that
I don't know. I was like, oh no, I don't know.
Yeah, it's more an expression, but it's like there's no way out of that.
Yeah.
And while there is an aspect of, we need to build better communities, as you are mentioning. Yes, there is a social and political aspect that needs to be addressed for sure.
Absolutely.
But those are different steps versus the world needs to fix themselves before I will always put my well-being at the expense of the changes that happen outside. And that's fucking dangerous. Because yes, I am a firm believer of these steps that we mentioned above, but that's going to take time because we are talking about system change.
honey,
And
if you're traumatized and you're like, I have an understanding of my trauma and I need the world to have an understanding of my trauma and treat me sensitively, good fucking luck. You set yourself up for all kinds of failure and injury.
that's the expression. Yes.
Yeah, like you set yourself up for failure and injury. Have fun with that.
Mhm.
Have fun with that. And I think there are going to be people on here, Patty, and I hope I didn't mean to interrupt you. I hope I didn't.
Go ahead.
I don't want people to hear this and go, how are these people in trauma work and they're telling us that? I didn't say that your trauma and my trauma and Patty's trauma and everybody's fucking trauma isn't significant. I didn't say that it's not real, that it doesn't have an impact. I'm telling you, and if you don't like to hear it, I'm so sorry. I'm telling you as your friend and as your advocate, if you want to feel better, if you want to do better and feel safer, find your own power and take responsibility for your experience in the world. Find people who will be good to you and who will listen to you and understand you, but don't expect people to manage your experience. That's a very different, place to work from.
Yes.
So I think we have to make that practical. So like, I want to make it really practical and benign. I stubbed my toe really hard the night before and now I'm limping, right? And let's say I'm walking on the street. Somebody doesn't know that about me, or they see me limping a little bit, but they don't know what the deal is. I'm not going to expect every single human being to go, can I help you with that? Whatever you're carrying, are you okay? They may not know how to react to what I'm presenting. But I can ask and say, hey, you know what? This is hard to manage right now. Can somebody help me with this? I'm doing my best. I've done it all the way I can on my own, but I'm still struggling. Can I get some help here? That's a very resourced and functional, productive way to approach. Like, we all carry a stubbed toe or several. We all carry broken pieces of us. So I know it's a wonky metaphor, but it's like,
yeah. From your example, I touch upon a key word that came to my mind, which is activating agency.
Yes. Oh, I love it.
We want to activate agency, yes, in the political system. And, you can raise awareness, build campaigns, invest your own money into, building these campaigns and funds and all of that stuff, or build an organization or go and fund the organization. There's so many ways to activate those arenas. You can go into the social and go into schools and give talks or whatever, right? Depends on how flexible your school systems are.
Yeah.
And activating also the personal agency arena. So all of them need to be activated for an actual system change where trauma is much less than what happens today. And where I want to go with this is, while we can address all of these or either of these, the importance of activating the personal, it doesn't mean that it's the only one or that you will get super far just by activating the personal. I'm also not sure about that, because I also address that we live in environments and that our environments do limit us.
Yes.
More people, more than others. That's like a fucking, for sure. That's reality. But even when we see that there's a limited scope of where I can act, I need to get as best of an agency around that place that I do have. And if you want to go into as an advocate for other people who are in your situation, or you want to go ahead, and that's great and that's wonderful. But we do need to touch upon the ability to be responsible for your part, for whatever your part is, that one, right?
I think, and that is, wow, you said so much. There's so much to address, but it makes me think immediately of stories that we're drawn to, the archetypes we're drawn to, and the Marvel movies. Whether you debate, the technical good of them or not, but they're a classic hero and heroine archetype of challenge. There's always the I fucked up and then I have to rebuild, and I somehow can see the limitations before me or challenges before me, but I can find the internal strength and the intelligence to cobble together a solution that moves me beyond them, that lets me meet them and do the best I can. And then people, we all cheer. We're like, wow, that was amazing. You see how they did that? But it's really metaphor for what we were looking for in ourselves. You know, we're looking for that agency in ourselves. And if for anybody who's listening to us talk, and if I sound, and I know I can be, and I'm working on demonstrating empathy more in my own coaching, because I take it for granted that I'm empathetic. I'm like, I'm here, aren't I? I'm here with you. Come on, get it together. But I think that fuego, that fire that people often hear, or the strong coaching that comes out where I'm like, so sorry, you're uncomfortable. Who cares? You're going to have to get it together. Let's get it together. Let's do this. I got you. Let's one step at a time. But at some point, you're going to have to take a step. At some point, you're going to have to move forward, or just stand on your own 2 feet, or just pick your face up out of the dirt. Something has to happen. No one else can do that but you. If I'm carrying you forward, you have no real power. And what I desire for everybody to have is power. Not Jeff Bezos power, although that's fucking cool. Give that to me, because I'll be Oprah. I'll heal the world. That's cool. But the personal power, not just externalized power. Personal power. Think of what the world would look like, everybody, if we all had a better sense of our value and our personal power. We would be treating each other in a very different way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely the access to that. You know, I'm very trauma sensitive, and like I said, sometimes I might be a little too caring in a sense for some perspectives, right? But I usually love to use context. What's the social context? What the historical context? I also see lots of people, particularly, I mean, because you know, I live in a Latin American country, and this is a lot of the people that I work with, and acknowledging that you cannot put yourself up to standards of, let's say, a modern world, or a first world country, whatever that fucking means. But, you know, like particularly women, when you haven't had the same access to information, when you haven't had the same education at home, and then you want to push yourself to have the same financial freedom as a man, that might be possible in certain situations, in certain areas of certain countries, but the fact that we acknowledge, hey, wait, you do have a cultural handicap, a social handicap, and then let's see where we can go from there, right? So I address both things, and this sort of like meta that you were referring, I think it's one of the things that I bring into when I teach about trauma, and that's Mel and I were discussing previously, sort of like the nuance that on my belief, of course, this is not the only way to work around it, right? But this is what I found to be true, what I've researched from lots of different sources. But how can I sometimes let myself, you were using the example of being carried. Sometimes I cannot walk, sometimes people cannot walk, and that's metaphorically and you know, like yes, and literal. How can I allow myself to be carried while not losing my personal agency?
How can I be supported?
Yeah.
And I think what you're talking about is so important, and I'm grateful to people like Patty in the world to balance out some of the approaches of people like me who are like, okay, let's get it together. Like, you know, come on, like pick yourself up. So, and again, I'm talking very simplistically, but there's deep work that in comforting yourself, loving yourself. When do I know how to ask for help? When do I allow myself to be carried? But the truth is, everything Patty just brought up, and that nuance of like, those are nuanced spaces. If you are committed to the story of only being in a negative space, you don't have access to the rational cognition to help you evaluate your circumstances and even raise your hand for the kind of help that will help you, that will actually move you forward. Yeah. Because we're all looking for help all the time.
I love where I see this going, because it's like, I find myself on the floor. I know I need to get up, but I can't. Sometimes we think if I'm super responsible and I'm taking charge of myself, that means I need to get myself to stand up and walk. But sometimes you can't. But agency is enough to, you know, call someone, hey,
yes,
that's agency enough.
Yes.
Even if you're not pushing yourself to do something that you're not able to do.
Even if you're crawling to the phone.
Exactly.
You're crawling to the phone and you're like, I am not good. I am not good, but I recognize I've done enough work that I can recognize, or I'm getting a moment of instinct that I'm not good. And here's the difference. Now that you've done the work, you've crawled, and maybe that crawl took 5 days, who knows how badly off you are. But now who are you going to call? Are you going to call the person who's going to help you, pick you up and carry you and take you to where you want to go next? Or are you going to call the person who's going to go, "I'm mommy, I'm sorry," and just pet you on the floor? It depends on what you need.
Yeah.
I like to have a combination of see me, see my pain, and have my friends and family support me and go, "I got you," but then hold me responsible for, now let's get you back into a powerful place. We can do this in a loving way without destroying you, anything destructive, taking care of you. But let's remind you of what you want and lovingly hold you accountable to your own agency and get you in a place. We're not going to leave you until you're back on your own feet, but we're here to remind you what you have, the power you have. That's what I find to be the most helpful support.
And this is a tricky topic that, I mean, I will not open up in detail because this belongs.
That's for the podcast number 2, the sequel.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, this needs to be addressed whenever we discuss trauma. I do address it in my groups, but I won't address it if we don't have like the perfect thing. But that's the difference between victim and victimhood.
Yes.
Because people want to skip through. Sometimes we do need to be acknowledged, and this is a medular part of trauma work, recognizing and validating that I was a victim at some point, and I was a victim of a situation. And a lot of this new age modernist pop psychology or fast food spirituality will want to, no, you were not a victim. Don't dare say the word. And I've seen so many people come to a consultation with me and they go like, well, but I don't want to be a victim. Well, this happened and I feel like that, but I don't want to be a victim. I'm like, fuck, allow yourself to be a victim for a while, 1 minute, a whole time, right? But let's explore what's evidently important, because we cannot jump into agency without acknowledging shit just happened.
Right.
That's acknowledging a victim thing, a victim situation that happened. But victimhood is allowing ourselves to lose agency. But again, I say this with a very delicate issue, because also people are struggling to find agency while they identify with a victim. And that's another aspect of nuance that's highly respectful. What I'm getting from Mel's talk and where she wants to go from is that whenever there's a chance for agency, we should take it, but without necessarily denying when there's pain, and being resourced enough to go back to that place where, what do I want to do with this, even when the answer is I have no fucking idea how to deal with this.
Yeah.
And this sort of agency, sometimes people will see it as, what can I do with it? But it doesn't mean go and solve it, go and walk even when you can't, because some people see it as this like hyper productive Western world, nothing matters, just go the fuck and do it. But as Mel was saying, find these places of empowerment. The way that I see it a lot in the work that I do is allowing yourself to be in an adult state, knowing that you have resources, even if they're not the same resources that you see around you. And to me, the jewel behind all of this is that when you find yourself in this adult place, when there's a sense of agency, I said sense of agency, doesn't mean that it takes the entire fucking world tomorrow. There's a switch that happens when people can be accessing these things. And what builds up, I said a jewel, because I see it as that, and I see when people are able to piece these puzzles together, and what comes is a sense of dignity. And after trauma, this is one of the first things that ground. Yeah. Whatever it is, this process in this beautiful mess that we just described, there's the cultural, there's the social, there's the political. Then we can sort of like build what the nuance for each of us is around how much of a responsibility we actually have, where we're not. And at the end of the day, recovering that sense of dignity that you are human. Yes. That has a right to be treated as such, to be felt as such, yes. to take space as an adult in dignity.
And if you don't, I hear Patty saying, if you don't know how to treat yourself like that, then you can't expect the rest of the world to treat you like that.
I mean, I sometimes say if you find somebody, bless, like
Bless.
that you can find people, like in my interactions with really wonderful people that, I mean, Mel and I have discussed this. It's like, oh, I think that I'm shit. And then I saw some, this is one of the things that I talked about when we speak about rebuilding community, that we sort of like skip through because these are huge topics, but community in us who lived in Latin families or grew up in Latin families. And I will have to say, for those of you who haven't, not all Latin families look the same, but it's very likely in these Latin countries and families that there was this nonna, this grandma, right? La abuela. And it's usually like she's been in this archetype of the abuela. She's slowed down enough in life. She doesn't feel like she needs stuff frantically, or she can be frantic, but it's not from a hunger place. She's just a fun Italian woman,
Right. There's nonas and tatas, my tata, archetype all over. Yeah.
And there's one of the beautiful things that I love about discussing these rebuilding communities, that these type of archetypes, whether that's your grandmother, but I'm referring to, it doesn't have to be your grandmother, right? It can be the neighbor, your teacher, whatever. But it's this person who can see you beyond your belief that you're shit or that you're stuck. And it's a blessing to have these kinds of eyes in the world, because as you were saying, you sometimes we're unable to love ourselves, but when there's these eyes that are able to love you even beyond your beliefs, it's like, maybe this thing that's happening in my body is not absolutely right.
Yeah, this thought I'm having, this feeling I'm having. And when people hear us talk about like agency, aren't I supposed to give that to myself? Yes, there's the goal is, or a goal is, when I'm working with people, is make sure you surround yourself with the mirrors that feed you, that reflect your best self to you, so you remember to live up to that. But also, if you don't have mirrors around, can you give it to yourself?
Yeah.
And that's bigger work, more advanced work, it's deeper work. But I value the relationships I have, and I value knowing Patty, because I can take this is like the practical app. I can take responsibility for how I'm feeling on a day where I'm like, I'm not feeling good about myself. And I realize that could start to affect me and maybe drive me to hurt myself or do something destructive, or it'll affect my work in a way I don't want. And I can call someone like Patty and go, hey, I'm forgetting who I am. I'm forgetting who I want to be. I have these voices telling me I'm shit. Can you remind me why I'm not? Can you help me get back to the place of agency so I can work again? It's okay to ask for help. I don't want people to say it's not okay. I don't want anybody to hear me talking and think, oh, I'm not allowed to ask for help. No, it's about recognizing you need help. That's a form of agency.
Yeah.
And then getting the right help. That's a form of agency. Yeah. We're all doing it already.
Yes.
Just we don't always know what help to get.
Just, I mean, so many layers of what you discuss, and you practically open up like the whole spectrum of all of the stages in a process where we regain this agency. And it's also, as you said, knowing how, when, and who to look out for help. Because I mean, of course, I am using this portrayal of the archetypal Latin family, but of course, not all Latin families are like that. And there's lots of also not nice nonas or abuelas.
Are not always nice nona. Can I say one more thing?
Yes, of course.
Okay. I think it's important that people get the practical application of this. It doesn't matter how you do it, folks. I would say whatever process resonates for you most deeply, but I want you to know that I just don't want to give the illusion that like, oh, I'm always in my fucking strength and power and blah, blah, blah. I had a recent romantic event also that was really difficult. And I was committed to having this breakup be healthy and move me forward. instead of devastate me and push me back. And that's already a choice, right? Like that took imagination to think there was a choice. And I have people like Patty to talk to, which is amazing for me. So I can be like, this is possible. And when I went through that, and I was in a sad, heavy place, and I knew what my goal was, and I was doing okay on my own, but I knew I needed help. And I called a girlfriend. I said, this is my goal. I want to feel amazing. I want to move forward. I want to live in the belief of hope for more love later and all. And she said, okay, I'm coming over. And we had a dance party in which we celebrated ourselves as beautiful women. We talked when I needed to talk. I cried when I needed to cry. I let my body live out all the processes and realities. I had my own exorcism, if you will. I had my own dance party, and she lent me her energy. She's someone I could trust to go, this is what I want. For yes, I believe you can have more. Yes, but it took work, and it felt great. It was most incandescent breakup I've ever had. So like something Patty and I will be talking about more and more. But
yes. We're advocates for empowering and less dramatic and Hollywood like breakup.
Yeah. You know, again, we buy into the story of I am broken. My heart is broken. Yeah, it's broken for now. Okay, you can get it together. And that does so much violence to people's Disney fantasies about what romance is. Like, you know what the truth is? You can have as many romantic adventures as you want in your life and be totally fine.
And once you flex your muscle around this, it's like, what? That was it? No drama? And then the beautiful question, now what do I do with this? With this space that
now what do I do? Do I even want something?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So definitely advocates for that. Wonderful. I mean, we could go on and on, but I think it's great stuff that we shared today. We hope that it's useful for a lot of people, confronting for sure, maybe for some, but hopefully empowering. Don't take what causes too much stress for now. Take what's useful, digestible, and I don't say easy, never said easy, because sometimes it's like, oh, I need to get there, but it's not just ready. And I love this building sort of like this wider vision around I'm an individual within an environment. How can I take agency so it's a combination. It's not just so always. Yeah, right. So and fixing everything and going again into this Hollywood, like feminine heroine conquers everything and gets the guy at the end. So let's go for a more realistic vision of what life really can be about. And as you beautifully said, let's enjoy the fucking process.
Let's have fun on the way.
Great. Closing thoughts, words.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to go with what instinctually pops up for me now. Please put on music and move. That's all that my request is for everybody here. Whatever music, it doesn't matter. Just do anything you want. Just move your body in a way that feels right for you. And that's an amazing practice daily, and a starting point that practice can evolve. But I beg of people, I'm on my hands and knees here, just move, listen to music, and move in a way that feels good.
We would do that with you if it wouldn't turn into a weird podcast where you're just hearing music and some weird ladies somewhere in the backdrop. But if you decide to play that music, imagine that we're dancing with you as well. So
we are dancing with you. It's time.
Wonderful having you, Mel.
Thank you, Patty. I'm so blessed to know you and have you in my life.
Back at you. And bye, everybody. See you soon. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.